Good morning, everyone. Welcome to December and welcome to another episode of the BDI Empower Series webinar. Today, we'll be talking about planning stable financial future, and more specifically, we'll be covering Pooled Special Needs Trust Enable accounts. My name is Bobby Dimitrova. I'm Manager Marketing and Communications here at BDI, and I'll be moderating this webinar for you today. Since we have people still joining us, let's give them maybe 2 or 3 more minutes before I introduce you to our today's speaker. All right, we have a lot to cover today, so let's go ahead and get started. Before we begin, a couple of things for you. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a copy of the recording directly to your email, the emails you used for this registration. And also, as a reminder, please refrain from sharing any personal information, just because the chat is accessible to all attendees, and any information and details you share will be visible to everyone. However, please share your questions, comments, and concerns in the chat, and our speakers will be happy to answer any questions you have after this presentation. We have dedicated 15 minutes after that only dedicated to answering those. And as a reminder, here are the programs we have here at BDI Empowers. We have behavioral health, family support services, benefits navigation, work incentive planning and assistance, jobs and career services, and Georgia Community Trust. And today we have here with us Anna Maki, who is the Director of Program Services. We have Veronica Roland, who is a Vice President of Administrative Services. And of course, our lead speaker today, Anita Gardner. Good morning, everyone. Anita, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to have you here. We are going to review pooled special needs trust and ABLE accounts, but we're also going to go over some benefit requirements and how to calculate benefits as well. And having my esteemed colleagues with me here today, Veronica and Anna, will help guide through some of that, but I'll be reviewing the ABLE accounts and the pooled special needs trusts. I'm very glad you're here. So I can start off with what is considered an asset. An asset is essentially anything over $2,000 that's in your bank account, in your individual's bank account. So if somebody has, any kind of money and it's over $2,000, Social Security says, "Oh, you have too much money. You don't need to continue receiving benefits." So, once you spend that money, then you can get your benefits back. But we all know that's way too complicated. So, getting an asset would be, cash, land, life insurance, personal property, inheritance, even vehicles. You can only have one vehicle in your name if you are an individual living with a disability. And that's some of the guidelines. But next, we're going to go over benefits eligibility requirements, but I'm going to refer to the lovely Veronica Rorlak for this one. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yes, this is just a kind of side by side, but of two of the most used means tested benefits that individuals receive. There are many others, but for today's presentation, these are the two main ones that really do impact individuals living with disabilities and some of those asset caps. So on the left side, you can see we've got information on the Social Security income. So we were just wanted to give some criteria about, who's eligible and then what is accountable resource. So individuals that are eligible for Social Security income are not able to be to engage in substantial gainful activity, and you'll hear that a lot as you're navigating the disability landscape. And that is due to some sort of a medical determinable physical or mental impairment that is expected to result in death, or that has lasted or is expected to last for a continuous period of at least 12 months. So it's a lot and it's very broad. And we have some wonderful other webinars that'll go into that a little bit more in detail. But for today's purpose, we're really looking at the financial impact. So the Social Security Administration really looks at countable income at $2,000, anything at $2,000 or in excess of $2,000 for an individual. And that does include if that individual is a child or a minor, and then $3,000 for a couple. Whereas Medicaid, and we are looking solely at the state of Georgia Medicaid, so each state has their own unique approach to this. But in the state of Georgia, there are a couple of different types of Medicaid. There's the age, blind, or disabled individual. And so their countable resources are $771 per month for an individual, $1157 for a couple, $2,000 for, I'm so sorry, that's a duplicate. The aged, blind, or disabled who are needing a nursing home care, that's a little bit higher. And that should read just $2,313 for an individual. And then qualified Medicare benefits. So if an individual is currently enrolled in SSI, SSDI, and receiving Medicare, income less than 100% of the federal poverty line, which changes. But typically that's $1,061 for an individual and $1,430 for a couple. So yeah, I'll let Anita go to the next slide.
Anita, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Okay, so countable income and non-countable income. Countable income is any earned income like wages, net earnings from self-employment, certain royalties. Unearned income is all income that is not earned, such as pensions, unemployment benefits, interest, dividends, income, and cash gifts. In-kind income is a type of support received from any source by you or your household that can be used to meet basic needs for food or shelter. Deemed income is when you no longer live with a spouse or a parent, when a disabled or blind child attains age 18, and when an alien sponsorship ends. I'm getting all distracted. Non-countable income is earned income, the first $20 of most income received in a month, the first 65 of earnings, and 1/2 of earnings over $65 in a month. And that's for employed individuals only. Income set as asides under plan to achieve self-support pass. Special rules for blind people working with students and impairment related work expenses. Unearned income is income tax refunds, Georgia Medicaid, like child support benefits. In-kind income assistance based on need, funded by the state or local government or an Indian tribe. Food or shelter assistance like HUD or food stamps. In-kind support other than food and shelter like medical expenses, telephone bills, utilities. All right, next slide. And I'm going to refer again to Veronica Roylack for this one. This is not my bailiwick. Go ahead, Veronica.
So when you're looking at, sorry, I'm trying to find the right, sorry, I'm trying to think, and it says calculating benefits. Okay. So when you are calculating how your benefits are being applied, it's really looking at your total income first, and then deducting any earned income from that total, and then dividing that in half. And then step 2 is you take unearned cash income and in-kind maintenance or deemed income, and then that becomes your total unearned income. Then step 3 is how do we kind of put some of that together, is taking your countable income and your uncountable or your unearned income and adding that together for your total countable income. And then step 4 in the way that Social Security looks at it is your federal benefit rate, which changes annually, and that's announced by Social Security, minus your countable income equals your benefit level. And then your step 5 is your federal SSI benefit plus your total income plus unearned income equals your gross monthly income. So this is a very high level overview of what that looks like, but it's really important to understand where the income is counted and how it's counted. Anna Mackey like to say something or add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to stress that this is the calculation for supplemental security income only.
Yes.
SSI is always going to be a monthly calculation. And when you're in that step 1 stage, if you have any impairment related work expenses, those are also deducted before you divide that in half. So just wanted to add that in. Yay.
And it's meant to, this is just meant to be a really high level overview of how you get to those numbers. Every situation is going to be unique, and I would highly recommend that you take an opportunity to meet with our benefit navigation team or with our trust services team to really find out exactly what may be your specific situation. So it is very situational. I think we had a few questions, but on the next slide, just to kind of tie this together, I really wanted to give a brief example of, and this again is a very high level example of what the math would look like if you put it out in a calculator, and I tend to be that person that likes to put things out in a calculator. So, so in this example, the person's income is $500. They're minusing that initial $20 that doesn't count. Then the earned income that doesn't count, which is $65, which leaves them with $415. And then that divided by 2 means that their earned income value of this scenario is $207.50. Next, you take unearned cash. So this person in this scenario is receiving an annuity payment from a worker comp settlement of $50. They're also getting $50 worth of food assistance from a parent, which would be considered in-kind maintenance support. and then they have a roommate that is paying $150 towards rent. And so that is considered a deeming or a deemed income. And so I wanted to try to break each one of those out just to show an example of what those different types of incomes would look like. And that means that this person now has an unearned income of $250. So then the next step, we just add the two together, the earned and the unearned income. And then we take that down to the next level, which is what the Social Security benefit rate, and this may have changed. That does happen. But so we're going to say in this situation, it's 771. You're going to minus the total countable income of 457, which leaves a benefit of $313.50. So try to kind of break that down, what that all looks like below, and then the total for this one individual would be total income would be considered $1,063.50. So again, this is just a really high level overview of what that will be. And as Anna, I know, did point out, there is going to be a Social Security income increase in January, which is always nice to see. That doesn't always happen in the world, but we are happy to see that. There's somebody had just wrote a few questions, but if you can write those questions out in the text, the chat, that we'd be happy to address each one of those questions individually. The next example we're going to look at is calculating the Medicaid and how they look at benefits or income. And so step one is to take the total earned income plus the assets available in and across any account that the individual may have in their name. And then that gives you your total cash assets. Step two then is the in-kind and deemed income added into that to come up with the unearned income value. And then when you add the cash asset value plus the unearned and asset, you're able to get your total asset limit. And yes, that was looking at things per the month. And again, as Anna Mackey pointed out, Social Security does look at income by the month. So it is very important to understand that this is not an annual reassessment, that they actually look at income values monthly, and that fluctuates for people oftentimes, especially if it is a working individual who may work a few more hours one month than they do the next month. So you always have to be very mindful of what your assets are that you're accumulating, and how any of those unearned income assets are going to impact that, as well as how much money you have in savings, because all of that gets added up on a monthly basis. So if you're like me, it's keep a calculator, keep a running spreadsheet, but not everybody's like that. So it's really important that you are mindful of those by the month, because it will impact your benefit eligibility on that monthly basis. And then you have to work with, especially Social Security, of maybe a payback or a penalty issue. You may be without your medical for a moment until that gets reinstated. And then you're, dealing with that Social Security office almost monthly. And so it's really important that you are utilizing professionals to help with a lot of this, because they can help provide you some guidance and additional support, as well as some tips and tricks. But really staying on top of that, income that you're earning on a monthly basis and communicating with employers, especially if it, as a person living with a disability, you think you're going to get close to that, maybe saying, I really can't take that extra shift. I can't get overtime. So really kind of working very closely with your managers to make sure that you're staying under that cap so that you do not have an impact to those benefits, because the value, I think personally, the value of the medical support is just much higher than that financial. But the fact that you have to go monthly to Social Security office can be very overwhelming and time consuming and very difficult to navigate. So just being really mindful of kind of what that limit is every month and kind of pre-planning out what you think based on schedules, which your income may be for the month.
Before we move on, we have several questions in the chat. The first one is, when SSI says we can use it for food and shelter, is clothing for the special needs child included?
Yes, you should be able to use it for any basic care needs, which would be food, clothing, shelter needs. Anna, do you have anything else to add to that? Yeah, that it is, clothing is considered a basic need, especially if you have specialized clothing, which can be very expensive.
The next question from the same person is, can a part of SSI money to ABLE account?
We're going to talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so this is just putting the numbers together for the Medicaid purposes, the same as we did for the Social Security, of what is considered an income, from that earned income basis. So this person, again, with the same scenario of earning $500 a month for this example, they have $50 kind of put away in their bank. That actually gets added. So they have assets of $550. And then I use the exact same scenario for the unearned income, which gave this person a total of $700 in assets. So Medicaid looks at it a little bit differently than Social Security. They also take different things into consideration. So that the one thing to be looking at here, and actually that should not be there. There's a little bit of problem with my math there. It should be $800. I apologize. $850. No. Nobody checked the math. This isn't in a spreadsheet, so normally it goes all together, but that would actually be $250 worth of unearned income, with 550 going to earned income in that example. So I do apologize for that. So that really does give you a asset limit of $800. So which, again, if you compared that to the Social Security, they look at it as you having assets over $1,000. So it's not apples to apples. It is very much apples to oranges in these scenarios. So navigating benefits from the federal entity, which is the Social Security, versus Medicaid, can be very different. So just being mindful when you're looking at the two. So Anita, I'm going to turn it back to you.
So when are these benefits at risk? Essentially, when your monthly earned income meets or exceeds $1,220, for Medicaid, when it exceeds $771. When family or friends provide cash or in-kind support that exceeds, $771. Purchasing a vehicle, if you have one vehicle in your name, and then you try to purchase another one, which would include like a recreational vehicle, ATV, motorcycle, or a boat, they consider that as well. So, owning a home or land that you do not live on, receiving a cash award, including accident settlement and estate or life insurance. And it's pretty much the same for both. Just some of the numbers are a little different, but so protecting the benefits which we're about to start, is creating a special needs trust or opening an ABLE account. So what is a pooled special needs trust? A pooled special needs trust it was created in 1993 and is allowable under federal and state statutes, but it was designed to help individuals living with a disability be able to have funds in their special needs trust and be able to receive their benefits at the same time. So the special needs trust holds the assets because we work with Social Security guidelines. We go by their guidelines, and it allows for the individual to have both. Each individual has their own sub-account. Because it's a pooled special needs trust, it has to be managed by a nonprofit organization. And the funds are pooled together in one greater amount. So all the sub-accounts are put into a certain pool and invested. So there's a greater gain. There is the Medicaid payback provision required for all first-party accounts. And the Medicaid payback provision is essentially saying, yes, you can receive these funds into the special needs trust, and yes, you can continue to receive your benefits as long as you pay us back when the beneficiary, the individual with the trust, passes away. We have another calculating benefits steps and examples, who Veronica is so talented at, and I'm not the best.
We just really wanted to look at how our earlier example, which we've already seen, against what could be a benefit to this person if they had a pooled special needs trust account. And the big difference is that annuity payment that is from the worker comp settlement can be directed to go directly to the special needs trust account, and therefore it's not counted at all. That is anything that is directly submitted into your pooled special needs trust. And I just want to clarify that it is not touched by the individual. So it doesn't hit their bank account and then is deposited into the trust. If it goes straight from the annuity company, settlement company, or insurance company to the special needs trust, then it is not counted by Social Security or Medicaid because it's not considered accountable income to that individual because of the protections that a trust offers. So in this example, and I know it's just $50 and I kind of try to keep small numbers, that actually means that the person has access to that $50 through their trust account, and thus increases their total income, or not income, but assets for the month to $1,113.50, because that $50 is no longer deducted from the unearned income.
So what is an ABLE account? The ABLE account, well, it's Achieving a Better Life Experience Act, and it was created in 2014. In Georgia, they call it stable. So ABLE and stable are the exact same thing. It's just Georgia's name for ABLE accounts. But the ABLE accounts are investment accounts similar to the 529 college savings accounts, and they're very similar to special needs trust, which we will go over the differences in a little bit. But one point is that the individual's disability had to have been there before the age of 26, which is one kind of requirement that makes it hard. If it's a settlement, then it's somebody who was hurt and is going to receive funds at a later date, so their disability may have started at 35, but It is irrevocable. It has to be managed by the individual, which is hard sometimes because there's a lot of Social Security guidelines that, have to be, you have to pay attention to, or you would have to pay back. There is a maximum amount of $17,000 of deposit annually. Which meaning also if you receive a settlement, could be more than $17,000. So you would have to open a special needs trust instead. And accounts over 100,000, you jeopardize your benefits. Next. And here's a little benefit of the ABLE account on income.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this one's again, taking the example we had before and putting that up against an ABLE account, and just, again, putting that annuity payment into, that ABLE account can be direct deposited. And then instead of mom and dad, giving, Sally $50 to go to the grocery store, if they put it in the ABLE account and then Sally went to the grocery store from that, then that would make $100 now not countable towards her total assets. So that really puts a benefit, of an additional $100 towards her overall assets. And again, these are relatively small because I don't know anybody that can just spend $50 a month on food in today's market. That may be milk. But yeah, just wanted to provide, why some of these things have benefits and when it may be beneficial to use that.
Eligibility. So it's pretty similar for the Special Needs Trust and the ABLE account. Both you have to be a resident of Georgia and have a medically determinable physical or mental impairment that results in marked and severe functional limitations. For the Special Needs Trust, as long as you are deemed eligible for Social Security or Social Security disability insurance because of your disability. For the ABLE account, obviously, as well, we just explained that you have to have received or your disability must have started before the age of 26, which is really big for the ABLE account. And that you are eligible for Social Security income or Social Security disability, have a condition listed on Social Security Administration's list of compassionate allowances and conditions, and has received and can provide, if requested, a signed diagnosis of the qualifying disability from a licensed physician. So when would you consider a Special Needs Trust or an ABLE account? So the Special Needs Trust, you would consider, when you have more than $17,000. If it's life insurance, estates, a windfall, hospital settlements, school settlements, or accident injury, anything over $17,000 is when you would consider having a Special Needs Trust. Or, long-term financial planning, creating a third-party Special Needs Trust is, for life insurance that's going to mature at a later date, obviously. So that's ABLE account is obviously the smaller amount. So individuals that are, that include earnings or gifts from family members that are a smaller amount of money can be put into an ABLE account. And savings for smaller purchases like tuition for later date, a vehicle purchase or a vacation, it's just a smaller amount of money that can be put into the ABLE account. Key points of consideration is there's no maximum annual deposit in the Special Needs Trust. The sole benefit rule applies, meaning it's only for the benefit of the individual. Can't be spent on gifts for anyone else. It can be spent for pets therapy, but it's only for the individual themselves. There's multiple investment options for the special needs trust. There are, low to high fees. There's restrictions to utilization, meaning you can't pay for rent, utilities, or food because that's what Social Security is supposed to pay for. But it allows for large sums of money and other assets to be held for the benefit of the beneficiary without jeopardizing their benefits. And the assets are managed by a trustee rather than the individual themselves, which helps because of the Social Security guidelines. If the ABLE accounts don't have that trustee utilization, so why do I always lose my train of thought in these? So in the ABLE accounts, they are not managed. It's managed by the beneficiary themselves. And there's so many Social Security guidelines, rules, and regulations that if something if some of the funds are used for something that they don't approve of, then it jeopardizes benefits and they could have to pay it back. But like we talked about, for ABLE accounts, there's the max amount of $17,000 annually. Anything over $100,000 can jeopardize benefits, but there is a total cap of $523,000 overall. There are multiple investment options as well, but the fees are extremely low for the ABLE account because it's not overseen or managed by a trustee, and because the individual themselves can do everything online. So the fees are really, really minimal. But there's no, one thing about the Special Needs Trust is that there's case management services as well. The ABLE account does not have any kind of case management at all. So how do we fund these accounts? The accounts can be funded by cash, Social Security back pay, workers' comp, wages, unemployment benefits, stimulus checks, and other financial windfalls. And for the Special Needs Trust, it's more will or estate plans or inheritance, life insurance, or cash gifts from family. The ABLE account is pretty similar. It can be funded mostly the same ways, but obviously the will or estate plans are probably more than $17,000. So they wouldn't be able to fund the account. I mean, they can fund the Special Needs Trust, which can fund the ABLE account, but but it has the max amount of $17,000 annually. General costs. So the Special Needs Trust has a little bit higher costs because because it's managed individually, essentially. And a bank or an attorney would have higher fees because they're investing the account individually. But fees can also be related to the type of customer relationship with the Special Needs Trust beneficiary, like bank accounts, investments, mortgages, and loans. Nonprofits are able to reduce the fee because they are overseeing a larger group, like we talked about the pooled Special Needs Trust. So all of our beneficiaries are essentially pooled together. So we communicate with them on an individual basis. They all have their own account, but because the funds are invested together, it's all, we're able to use a lower rate. The ABLE account has kind of a little bit of extra fees on top of their, $325 a month for the account. We have the TrueLink card, but they have the TrueLink card, but it's $5 a month. And there's small asset fee 0.19% and 0.33% on investments, depending on which one you choose. And then $10 a year. But they have, kind of these just little other fees, but it's still very, very inexpensive. But there's, no oversight. The beneficiary family has to report to SSI all of, what they're spending their funds on. So that could, be a risk. So the risks. Receiving distributions that are not eligible could impact your benefit eligibility. We've talked about that. So, Social Security guidelines, rules, and regulations. The nonprofit special needs trust is, overseeing all the expenses and making sure that the benefits are secure, by what goes out of the special needs trust. The ABLE account has ease of access, but the ease of access allows for the potential of ineligible purchases, which could, lose your benefits, Social Security payback risks, additional end-year payback risks, tax penalties, and, like depositing over $17,000. I'm sure they have some kind of, something through their online system that would allow you, or that would not let you deposit more than $17,000 annually. But if they don't, that could impact your benefit. And if the individual is not familiar with all of the rules and regulations, then, and they spend on something that's not allowable, then, it could jeopardize those benefits. So what do these accounts pay for? They can pay for essentially anything and everything else that Social Security is not. Social Security, it can pay for anything that Social Security is supposed to pay for: food and shelter. The Special Needs Trust can pay for everything outside of that. So caregiver services, assistive technology, education, case manager, caregiver, respite, clothing, recreational vehicles, only one. The ABLE account is able to pay for rent, utilities, foods, and restaurants, which is a nice. So additionally, right, as well as all these other things, right? So they can both pay for, all these things, and then the ABLE account, is able to pay for the extras that the Special Needs Trust is not able to pay for. Although they have talked about allowing food for the Special Needs Trust. It's being discussed, so that's a good thing.
Yeah. Not been approved yet, but
No.
We're very hopeful that
Right.
they're finally realizing that is an issue for persons
Right.
with disabilities.
Right. And also, I think I mentioned earlier that the Special Needs Trust can fund the ABLE account. So, if there is an issue or trying to figure out how, what an individual needs, they can have both. And the Special Needs Trust that was created can send funds to the ABLE account, as long as, as the Special Needs Trust knows what those funds are going to be used for. Then they have the, keep getting distracted by the chat. So then they can fund, it can fund the ABLE account. Access to funds. So both the Special Needs Trust and the ABLE account both have TrueLink cards. Like I said earlier, the TrueLink card for ABLE accounts is $5 monthly. But there's online account access to both. There's online bill pay for both. There's the Special Needs Trust, our Special Needs Trust does direct deposits, wires. We pride ourselves on having a 48-hour turnaround for reimbursements. And we can pay vendors directly. Like if someone wants to go out and get the car, we can communicate with the dealership and send the money so that it's easier for the individual. But for stable or able accounts, there's no professional management, so there wouldn't be that opportunity of them communicating with the dealership to purchase the vehicle. Okay, so this is a lot of information about questions that we've received from individuals. Like who can establish the account, whose assets fund the account, who controls the account or the trust, and the maximum contribution. And I don't think I need to review all of the questions. I'll do a little bit. The assets that fund the account for able accounts, it's third parties or the beneficiary's money. For a third-party special needs trust, anyone other than the beneficiary, meaning it has to be someone else, so a third party. And that is typically, an inheritance or life insurance from a parent. The first-party trust has to be funded by the individual's own assets. So if they receive a settlement, then it has to be a first-party trust because those funds are already in their name. Who can establish the account? The able accounts can be created by a parent, but it's in the beneficiary's name. So it's only for the beneficiary, and it's already the individual's assets. For the third party special needs trust, it has to be created by a parent or a grandparent or guardian or anyone on behalf of the beneficiary. The first party trust, which is funded by the beneficiary's money, should be created by the beneficiary. A parent, grandparent, or guardian can create the account, but it is in the beneficiary's name. We've gone over the maximum contribution limits. So the next set of questions, is there a separate written agreement? For the ABLE accounts, enrollment is managed by the ABLE program offered by each state, but it's all online. Everything is online. For special needs trust, it's called a joinder agreement, and essentially it's a agreement with the individual or parent and the special needs trust organization, with the Social Security guidelines kind of written in so that, they're saying it's okay to have the funds and receive the benefits. So it is a separate agreement. How to decide when it's the right account? When the individual is currently or will potentially receive means tested benefit. So for ABLE account, when someone wants to give assets to the beneficiary has too many assets under the $17,000 maximum annually. For a third-party special needs trust, when someone wants to give or leave assets for the beneficiary for the future, these third-party trusts can be created and sit there and wait until they're funded. With us, there's no fees until the account is actually funded. And like I said, for the first party trust is when the beneficiary receives the settlement or already receives an inheritance. We've had a couple trusts that they had gotten the funds and then we're at risk of losing their benefits. So put the inheritance into a first party trust because the money had already gone to their bank account. Medicaid payback, actually go back once. Yeah, there's Medicaid, repay Medicaid upon death. So for the ABLE accounts, yes, but only Medicaid received after ABLE accounts start. So once the account was created, from that day in the future, that those funds need to be paid back. The third-party special needs trust does not have the Medicaid payback. First-party trust, yes, has the Medicaid payback provision, meaning that from whenever they started receiving benefits until they pass away, that total amount is what is requested by Medicaid when the beneficiary passes away. So any funds that are left over when the beneficiary passes away is what is sent to Medicaid. Anything over that would go where it's directed to go in the agreement. Okay, now the next. Fees. So able accounts are, you know, much cheaper, but there's the max amount. Third party special needs trusts, you know, there's attorney fees, bank, investment advisor taxes, and additional fees. But like I said, the third party trust through Georgia Community Trust there's no fees associated with the trust until it is funded. The first party is the same, although it's funded, so it is so there are fees. Investment options are for the able accounts, the investment strategies may be changed twice annually. For the third party and first party and D4Cs, there are no restrictions. And for able accounts, yeah, you can only have one account, and it's associated with your social security number, so they don't allow if you have if another one is created. You can have as many third party or first parties and D4Cs that you'd like. Valid distributions, the able accounts, because it's not managed, you know, it's just an online request essentially. So, you know, broadly defined disability expenses, but includes living expenses are, you know, the valid distributions. But the third party and first party, any expense that is for the sole benefit of the beneficiary, you know, with implications of no distributions for food or shelter. Okay, benefits of having both. Like I said, the special needs trust can fund the able account. The able account can pay for basic living expenses such as, you know, food and shelter and utilities. But the special needs trust can be used to protect Social Security benefits jeopardized if the value available okay, I don't know why I'm trying to read that sentence. So if the able account has more than $100,000 in the account, Social Security counts dollar for dollar everything over that, even though there's a max amount of 523 that can be put into the account. But once it exceeds 100,000, that's when Social Security can start counting those dollars. Child support can be sent to the special needs trust, tax and asset free, and then sent to able to be used as needed. Allows more flexibility and movement of funds, and the beneficiary can have the ability to manage their own assets. So if they have both the special needs trust and the able account, they are able to use the able account themselves individually, you know, with their family, but they, you know, also have the oversight of the special needs trust that's sent to the able account. So there's, you know, once the special needs trust knows what the able account's going to be used for, they can send the funds there. I think we already had this slide, but was there something else you wanted to mention, Veronica?
No, I think that
Okay.
the idea.
Okay. All right. So things to consider, you know, when did the disability occur? How much money is involved? Whose money is it? Are there assets in addition to cash, like land or property? Who's going to manage the account, you know, and work with the guidelines that Social Security has so few of? A lot. What are the costs involved, and, you know, what benefits the individual is actually receiving? But I know we wanted to have time for questions, and I'm sure there's a bajillion in the chat box. So
Yeah, we have
Um,
time for 1 or 2 questions only. And thanks, Veronica and Anna, for replying all those that were posted in the chat.
Yeah, the one I'm typing now, the question is there an advantage or disadvantage of setting up these accounts when your child is young? This individual has babies. I would say the advantage is definitely that it is part of your future financial planning for your loved one. Oftentimes, persons with disabilities will have large financial needs throughout their lifespan and at different milestones throughout their lifespan. But those do tend to deteriorate over time, and so the need is higher. So it just allows for a planning of those needs in the future. And as you do it when they're younger, it's something that you can also direct the funds there and help with eligibility requirements for some of the benefits that they may need throughout the lifespan as they start to grow. Some of the disadvantages of these accounts, it really does depend on the type of account. I don't see many disadvantages to setting up like an ABLE account. Just remember, if you're putting a small amount of money in there, it does allow some growth due to investments because the funds are invested. As a pooled special needs trust, it would probably be a third party account. It's just making sure that you have a good amount of money to start a special needs trust. If it's going to be a small amount, I would always recommend an ABLE, but if it's going to be a larger amount, over that $17,000 cap, then the special needs trust is definitely a benefit because it has more opportunities for investment growth. And to it doesn't have a maximum, where ABLE has a maximum account growth. But it's always good to have a third party account set up for future. Because we never know what's going to happen. As a parent, what's going to happen to my child if I have an accident. And so setting up a third party pooled special needs trust allows that to be set aside and able for, if something were to happen, it's kind of a protection for that loved one in the future. So I always recommend that you consider a third party account.
There was another question about the what happens to the money in the stable account at a person's death. I've heard it has to be given to Medicaid, and I've heard it goes to the family, which is correct.
I did respond. Again, there are Medicaid paybacks to ABLE accounts and first party pool or special needs trust or pooled special needs trust. So that money has to go back for whatever that person has used in Medicaid benefit. So let's say you have $100,000 in your ABLE account, your Medicaid benefit was $80,000. You'd have to pay Medicaid first, the $80,000, and then the remaining $20,000 could be distributed to the beneficiaries. That's very similar in the first party account, and that is a requirement by the state of Georgia. That's in our state laws. So the another thing was if you have the now comp waiver, how does this affect the benefits regarding stable, ABLE, or special needs trust? I don't believe that it's a Medicaid now comp waiver is a Medicaid waiver. So it's going to follow the same Medicaid rules regarding eligibility and assets. So if you're utilizing a special needs trust and an ABLE account, those aren't they're not considered assets, so they're non-countable. So whatever value you have in those will not be counted at that time when you're going through your eligibility criteria for now comp waiver. But just be mindful that you do have to meet those Medicaid waiver the Medicaid requirements. If you have
one more question.
I'm sorry.
We have time for only one more question.
Oh no. Try to see. So the last question there is, how do you initiate the Medicaid payback at someone's death? So both of the administrators of these accounts, once you have reported that the person has passed and we receive verification of that, then the PSNT, we will work actually with state Medicaid for that final payment. And I believe that ABLE administrators will do the same once a report of the death has happened. So the administrator themselves will, once you have reported the passing, will take the steps to work with Medicaid. They'll do the final reporting, and then Medicaid typically issues us a notification of the remaining payment to them. And then depending upon the value, again, if it's less than the Medicaid payback, then all of that goes to Medicaid. If it's more than, then any excess will go to any designated beneficiaries of the account.
Medicaid essentially sends us a bill.
Yes, they do.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anita, Veronica, and Anna, for this information. I know a lot was covered and probably many of you are overwhelmed, but remember, you will receive this entire recording right after this session. And also feel free to contact Anita. You can see her
Please.
email here at on the screen. And if you have questions outside the trust, also contact, you see the phone number on the screen. It will redirect you to the appropriate person depending on your questions. And also we hope to see you for our next webinar, which is on December 21st, when Anna Maki will be talking about understanding Medicaid waivers. And of course, stay in touch with us on social media, and here you can see all our social media channels and also our website where you can find a lot of helpful information. Thanks again for joining us, and I'll see you next time.
Happy
Thank you,
holidays.
everyone.